Good evening. Tonight, the Hubble turns 35 and still has some spring left in its step. A realistic look at all the country's expenditures in the world on R&D as a percentage of GDP. Very interesting graph. Astra, whose stock was delisted last year when the stock collapsed, is now on the comeback trail a year later with including a $44 million contract it has signed with the Defense Department. And apparently, half the universe's hydrogen has been missing all this time, but was recently found again. I mean, there are so many jokes there, we could spend the entire show making them up. This and more coming up. From the news desk at the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, my name is Thomas Andrew Olson, and this is The Unknown Quantity. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all doing okay tonight. I'm getting better. I was away on Monday, unfortunately, but I'm back in action. Obviously, as you all know, this show is brought to you by the Center for Space Commerce and Finance. What is the Center? We champion and strengthen emerging space startups, space scalable small and medium enterprises, and space adjacent enterprises worldwide through advisory, access, and advocacy across the funding spectrum. Our programs fortify business plans and investor readiness for founding teams at varying levels of development. So we encourage our listeners and fans to support our work. Up in the upper left corner of your screen, you should see a lovely little QR code. You click into that, and it'll take you to our donation portal. So thanks in advance for helping. Now, joining me is one of my podcast producers and entrepreneur on his own right, one of my oldest space friends, Michael Lane from Liftport. Michael, come on in, man.
Hey, how's things?
I'm okay. I'm in good shape for the shape I'm in, or something, as my doctor would say. But yeah,
okay. Yeah, we kind of missed you on Monday, but we muddled through. So I hope that went okay.
I haven't looked at it yet. I've been like, oh God, I should have been there. You know,
it's all
my
good.
own boss. You know, my own boss. You know,
right? Yeah. It was good. Walt is an interesting person. He's a tremendous guest. He's got great stories. Yeah, it was fun. I was not as prepared as I wanted to be because you were going to do the heavy lifting on that show.
Right.
So I spent a little bit more time on the history and didn't get as much time on Avialto as we wanted. So that was maybe if I were to go back in time, I would have done that a little bit different. But it was great, and we loved having him. So we'd love to have him back.
There were a lot of good questions. Definitely a must.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff coming up this week. God, what do I start with? Well, the Hubble is 35 years old.
That's incredible.
Today. Happy birthday to you. You know,
right.
And apparently it's still holding its own. I've got a couple of links there. There was this is the thing that originally blew everyone's mind, sending back all these pictures from every place. And it just changed our view of the galaxy and beyond. Because remember, they just left the lens open one time. They did that really made a long exposure, really deep into space. And all they saw was like a billion more galaxies. Yep. It's like the universe is even bigger than we can imagine, and Hubble just caught a little piece of it and like blows your mind. And so this changed the whole view of space for a generation and more. And so it's amazing it's still around and it's still working. There's a question on whether there are going to be any future repair missions or upgrade missions to that. It's it's always a budget thing. They're going to talk about that. Yeah, that's the picture. That's right. That's it right there. It's like, wow.
It's my favorite. So Hubble's deep field image. Hubble's deep field image is one of my favorite images of all time ever. They were not expecting to find anything there, right? They looked into what they thought was a black place, a dark place in the universe, and they focused a dime-sized point 80 feet away.
Yeah.
And this is what they found.
Yeah.
And then that dime
Right.
towards all the way around. And from that, they calculated 70,000 million stars. And it's like that one thing is worth all of the effort as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, I have a love affair with the Hubble for sure.
Yeah. That other article was in the same outfit. It's they think that Hubble still hang, and they're interviewing a guy that had sorry.
Go ahead.
No, the other link associated with that was a question off of whether or not the Hubble could hold its own and still prove itself useful, and apparently it can. They interviewed a guy for this article, and he's very familiar with both the way Hubble does things and the way James Webb does things, and they do them a little bit differently, but apparently they complement each other. So Hubble is Hubble's different than James Webb is that it's great at imaging both the visible light that we see and the ultraviolet wavelengths, and even shorter and more energetic wavelengths. But they function very differently, but they seem to complement each other in how they see things. So Hubble is still a very useful workhorse out there for science.
Well, this is irritating. Tom, I'm gonna stop that.
Okay. Yeah, what's going on?
I can't. Yeah, I don't know. There's I'm getting intermittent losses here. Sorry about that.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
I'm not going to show the screen. Talk about Hubble. Talk about Hubble for a moment.
Well, I did that. I'm done. I want to move on to the next thing.
Right. Move on. All right. Let's see if we can regain this thing here. Go ahead.
Okay. The other thing I noticed this week is it's also a space.com article. It's about how private spaceflight, private commercial space is a very hot thing now in the DC circuit. So a lot of people involved at the various government levels. We have a golden opportunity here, it turns out. What am I doing? There it is. I want to find this guy. Yes. Yep. They interviewed a guy for this article called named Kosova. What's his Dave Kosova, and he's the head of the Commercial Spaceflight Federation.
Yep.
And it was years ago to help launch commercial astronauts into space and promote space tourism. You have a membership base of about 80 companies. They're mostly launch and reentry providers. But now, later on, as the thing evolved, it's now an organization that's focused on everything that launch enables. And so this huge commercial space industry is blossoming and flourishing. So they changed their name slightly to the Commercial Space Federation. I don't know how that helps them, but they did that. And they're saying now is a really golden opportunity for getting involved in space commerce and things because the current status in government circles and like AST and places like that, it's a hot time now to get involved in this. There's a lot of friendly faces in the bureaucratic halls of DC to make things like this happen and keep it going. Maybe somebody woke up one morning and looked and saw, oh, it's a $625 billion industry now. Maybe we should, be a little more friendly toward it.
Paying attention to it a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to bring on, I'm not going to name him, but he's a pretty well economist that deals with national level interests and advice to, no exaggeration, trillions of dollars in capital. And I asked him, what does he know about the space industry? And he's like, nothing. I'm like, it's not on your radar at all. I'm like, why would it be? And I'm like, because it's $600 billion. It should maybe be on your radar. And so I've sent him a couple reports so he'll be useful as a guest on the show. But he genuinely did not know this was a thing. So it's nice to know that Washington, D.C. is starting to pay attention.
Yeah. Well, I've been reading all the things this Cavosa guy has been saying. It's like, man, he's like a clone of me. These are things I've been talking about for a long time. He says there, and he said one thing is he agrees with us. There's a healthy entrepreneurial startup culture in space now, which means that's a lot of money. They're being pumped into lots of small and medium-sized companies, and that's good. They may not all survive. Of course, you always go through these periods, but no, he doesn't think anybody can pick which ones are going to be the winners and losers. The market's going to do that, and just whatever happens in that market. But it's a healthy commercial space ecosystem. It's an entry point. It's grassroots. There's a lot of executives and engineers leaving big companies and saying, we have a better way to do this. So let's bootstrap it and do something. That's happening a lot. And that's how this thing grows. And it's just healthy. Yeah. It's a healthy commercial ecosystem. So we're living in a glorious time, my friend.
Great. Is pretty much every day. I mean, one of the reasons why we do these news wrap-ups is because pretty much every day something cool is happening. Something that kind of proves that our 25-year effort to push this rock uphill is actually worth the effort. Like there's progress there. So I'm definitely pleased by this. All right, absolutely. What's next?
Well, I want to just throw out something quickly. You sent me something the other day. It's just an image I wanted to share, and it's a very interesting visual. And it's total R&D investment by country as a percentage of GDP. I thought that was kind of fascinating to see who's where on that cycle.
Okay. They keep I can't seem to stop them. Oh, Jesus. Are you kidding me?
Okay.
All right. So there you go.
Make it stop.
Make it stop. I love this thing. I think it's really intriguing. Go ahead.
Well, I find it interesting too. I always thought the U.S. should be number one in everything, right? We should have the number one in R&D, and Israel's the number one in R&D spending by GDP, percent of GDP. The U.S. is close, is close to that next inner circle, but they're up there with South Korea and Taiwan. But I don't know what that portends. Even Sweden is up there, so I don't know what that portends. I just want to put it out there as a food for thought for some people. It's
I think it's interesting. People don't think of Belgium or Denmark or Finland as being, particularly advanced technology savvy. Right. And yet here they are making a commitment almost equal to the United States in terms of GDP. Now, okay, we have a bigger GDP, so this dollar amount becomes larger.
If you change it to the dollar amount, that dollar amount is probably huge compared to the other countries. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But interestingly, you say you don't know what Sweden has. Sweden has something that the rest of those countries don't. They have Saab. They don't just make cars. Saab is a major military contractor. They build all sorts of hardware for defense departments around the world. They're a huge presence in Australia, for example. They're like the number one contractor down there.
Yeah.
So actually that makes a little sense.
It does. What I think is a little bit interesting is, China's in the third ring in, at 2.6, but so dollar for dollar and percentage wise it's less, but I think if you were to do a comparison between the number of people that this amount of money, the US amount of money, can buy versus the amount of money, staffing, brain power, breakthroughs that you can get in China, I bet they're either at parity or China might be slightly ahead, only because of disparities in incomes. So that's just a guess. I'm not trying to start a fight with anybody about that, but my hunch is that this is more valuable than, their 2.6 of their GDP is more valuable than our 3.4 of our GDP.
Yeah. Well, I did read an article a couple of years back about China's hiring practices, in their space industry in particular, their space program. And basically they're hiring 5 guys for every one NASA guy.
Right.
And they're doing the same, but they're doing the same work. They're redundant. It's so I just wonder, how this, if you were to do an apples to apples, because this is not an apples to apples. Not at all.
I would like to know what that looks like, because I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. What else we got? How about Astra?
Oh yeah. Astra. Again, they were delisted off the NASDAQ just a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
Because there's a stock collapse. It was worth like pennies. It's got to be at least $1, or you're not. You don't stay. And so, but apparently they reinvented themselves, and they also pivoted. They pivoted back to a privately held company, so they could raise money again. And they did raise some, and now they've signed this contract. What I say it was $30 million, $40 million contract, $44 million with the Defense Department to do some journeyman work for them. So, good for Astra. I'd like to see a comeback story like that, because a lot of them don't.
For sure. Yeah. All right. I'm going to close off the news only because I'm going with these links. So let's just go ahead and move on over.
Well, I got that one last thing. We don't need to put in the link. I got this one last thing. It was apparently, I didn't know this. According to the boffins at the space sciences, half of what they figure should be all the hydrogen gas in the universe has been missing. Now they figured out where it is, and they found it. I think I have so many jokes you can make about that. Mine personally is they probably found it near that big ball of all the missing left socks from your washing machine. I think that's where they found it, and so it all goes somewhere. It goes over there, and so we found our left socks. We found all the rest of the hydrogen. Yay, hydrogen! You can make more stars. That'll be great.
Funny. That's funny. I'm going to add one more thing in here. I'm going to try and bring it in. The folks over at the New Space Nexus down in New Mexico host their big annual conference. This is a kind of a big deal. It's definitely where the sausage gets made. It's a bit of a chore to go through these meetings. I might be there next week. I still haven't gotten my flight, and it's on Wednesday, Tuesday. So the clock is ticking for me to get my act sorted out. But I want to point out it's a really, really interesting in the weeds policy discussion. And the stuff that happens here turns into national policy in a way that no other place that I've been happens. And I think that's important. And they have their annual report. So this is the analysis of all last year. It just came out. I'm not even going to pretend that I've read 111 pages. It came out 8 hours ago. I'm going to try and read it over the weekend. I think it's really worthwhile. So
it seems vaguely important.
It seems vaguely important. That is our stock phrase. I'm going to post this to the chat if anybody wants to capture it and take a look. All right.
All right. As you know, folks, our show is basically at the crossroads between space and money and development, business development, and all the good things kind of in between. And we usually either profile people who get the checks, profile people who write the checks, and in many cases, profile people who help a lot of checks happen for a lot of people and are movers and shakers. And we have someone tonight we want to profile and have on there with us. She's a very fast rising star in this community, in the space community. And so tonight's guest is Laura Seward Forczyk. She's the founder of her consulting firm, Astralytical. It's a consulting firm dedicated to guiding businesses, organizations, and government entities to grow in space strategically. She's also a space career coach and the author of 2 books. And we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more. Laura, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. You kind of started almost out of tragedy and then turned it into hope. I want to get a little bit about your background and and how you got to this place, because I thought it was an interesting story.
Well, the tragedy I assume you mean is the startup that I worked at that failed. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yes, as it goes with any startups, and especially startups that are intending to do human space flight or any space flight, it is very challenging. And especially challenging when the CEO mismanages the money and is still under investigation for fraud. So
That's a new wrinkle I hadn't heard before. We're not going to bring that up, but
we're not going to go into the whole story, but
Okay.
I do have a YouTube video out about it. Swiss Space Systems. I worked for them. I was running their Florida office. I was their second employee in the United States. We were going to do point-to-point suborbital transportation, first with satellites, then with people. I was so excited for this company.
Mhm.
And then they cut off payroll. And so I had to find my own way. And later on, the CEO of the company actually set himself on fire by accident, trying to blame the mafia to pretend that there was something going on with the mafia when it was really just him mismanaging the money. So
I never heard that side of the story.
he's still under investigation in Switzerland, is last I heard a few months back.
Jesus.
Oh my God.
So when it comes to trusting who is in a space company, you need to do your research as to who is part of that team. Who is, if you're an investor, where is that money going? Making sure you do your due diligence, which is something my company does, by the way, to help you to invest your money wisely, or to join a company wisely, or to, in any other way, trust, partner with, become a customer of a company wisely. But yeah, so it was tragedy in that I was actually 9 months pregnant when they cut off healthcare. And if it wasn't for my immediate boss in Washington, D.C., paying out of his own pocket for me to have healthcare, I would have given birth to my first child without it. And I did not know what to do.
Wow.
So here I was, brand new mom, hadn't been paid properly in about 9 months. They still owe me. I won a lawsuit, by the way. They still owe me half a year's salary that I'll never see.
Right.
And I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? So I started Astralytical. That was 9.5 years ago. And I didn't know what I was doing because I'm a scientist. I am an astrophysicist and planetary scientist by training. I have no business background. I had no experience with how to run a business, how to do marketing, how to do sales, how to do customer service, like nothing. I was making it up as I went. And you can imagine how difficult that was to learn on the job, making all the mistakes and really stumbling through it. But here it is, 9.5 years later.
Something worked. Good. So congratulations there. Take us through some of those early days. Missteps, if you're willing to tell us, surprise successes, planned successes. What did those first couple of years look like?
It was tough. And if it wasn't for the fact, like full disclosure, I am married to a man who had a stable paycheck and health insurance. And so if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to survive because I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to get clients. I was way undercharging. And so if you're out there wanting to start a company, even if you want to do freelance work, like quadruple or even times 10 what you think you should be charging. Because trust me, you are undercharging. This is what I continuously come across. Women are particularly susceptible to this. I also came from the sciences where we are taught to volunteer and that our labor is a benefit to the community, and it is. And so I spent a lot of my 20s, a lot of my early career volunteering, and it did help my career in other ways, but it taught me that my value was not worth charging for, and I had to unlearn that, and I'm still having to unlearn that. So that was a huge pitfall. Also, there's psychology in that if you are charging too little, I have seen clients, potential clients, I mean, walk away from me because I named a price too little and they didn't take it seriously. I've had a client literally not take my advice because it was throwaway money for them. And so there's also the psychology of you get what you pay for. And so keep that in mind as well when you're trying to figure out what you should charge for a service, a product, anything like that. Money equals quality in a lot of people's minds. And then you have to, of course, deliver on the quality. You have to do what you say you're going to do. It helps to have processes and systems in place. If you can afford it, it helps so much to have help, especially behind the scenes help. And then choosing wisely who your clients are. I had the worst client I've ever had last year. And I've had some bad clients in the
Oh,
beginning.
now
Of
wait
that
a
first
second,
year.
because I remember when I first met you about 5 years ago, you're like, this is my worst client ever. So this is
Yeah, this one tried to steal money from me and has threatened me with a lawsuit. So
Oh, geez.
worst
Yeah.
client ever.
Clients from
So
hell.
the first
Absolutely.
year was rough because the first year, my very first client, she
Right.
didn't have money to pay me. She I literally did all this work for her. And I'm like, I can't take your money because you're not paying your utilities bills. I can't in good like conscience take your
Right.
money.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then the next client I got exploited me because of the contract, the way it was written, it was that they could give me endless amounts of work for a flat fixed fee every month, a retainer fee.
Right.
And so they exploited that to the max, you wouldn't believe. And so
Hmm.
I had to learn through the missteps because when you don't have a business background, unless you get some kind of business training, and eventually I did get like sales
Yeah.
training,
Yeah.
marketing training, branding training, I've gotten some training, but unless you have that training from the start or a partner, a founder, a co-founder that can help you with those business things, you tend to make those same mistakes that I made and probably some other ones that I made and I'm not even mentioning.
I will say that your website's gone through some pretty giant upgrades since we first met 5 years ago. So,
Yeah, and the way it is right now, actually, I'm working with a marketing person right now to even make it better. So like it's even going to go through another iteration in the next week or so.
Do I know? I think I know your marketing person, right?
I don't know. I've had several.
J-
So this one, she's
JS.
new to the
Oh,
space
she?
industry.
Okay, she's okay.
Yes.
I'm thinking it's
Yeah,
a guy.
she is
Right.
new to the space industry. She actually is one of my coaching clients because I also have the separate brand of yourspacecareer.com. And so she is one of the people who I help who is coming from outside the space industry with a marketing background, wanting to figure out how to do marketing, website, data visualization for clients. And so that's just an example of the other types of clients that I work with are individuals who want to grow their space careers.
Oh, right on. Right on. Okay. I'll put that link in. I already put the Astralytical one up, but I'll add that one to it. All right. So the early days were rough. They were bumpy. When did it start to smooth out? When did it start to, there's always bumps, so I'm not ignoring that. But when did you feel like you started getting some traction? I just learned before the show started that you're not a solopreneur anymore because I thought that you still were. So that's a big move. When did things start to feel like you started to get a handle on it?
You know how they say, I don't know the exact quote, but something about how the CEO is the growth limiter of a company. I was
Mhm.
the bottleneck. I was the one who was preventing my own company from growing by my limited mindset of what I was capable of and who I should be targeting and who I should be helping. And I find I'm still doing this. Like I actually had a potential client call a few weeks ago, and I said, I can do this, this, and this. And they said, well, like, I was down here, and they're like, you need to go up here. You need to be doing this. I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. I should be. So it's that kind of thing where I was like down here and I'm like, this is what I can
Cool.
do. And I had to continually like reassess what I'm capable of. And again, who I'm targeting and what I'm charging them. And I will admit the sales training certainly helped because then I could figure out actually how to close a deal, which I'm still very bad at. But it's one of these things where if you actually have the sales training, then you don't feel embarrassed about asking for the closing of the deal, right? Asking for the business. Um, and then delivering. And the more that I delivered, and I built up that confidence to know that I could. And then I got into a really good cycle where, like I was getting good clients. I was doing like it was good. Like this, like it was just like regular revenue, I guess,
Yeah.
is what it was. Like it made me feel really good about where the company was that I hadn't felt before because before it was feast and famine and
Okay.
not very good feasts.
Right.
It was
Yeah. Yeah.
like little meals and famine.
Snacks and famine. Snacks and famine. Yeah.
But once
Yeah.
I got into like a more regular, like a company influx of revenue on a predictable basis, it started to feel more real, even though I've been doing the company for years. Like it
Yeah.
really did. Like I felt like I could build the company instead of just trying to keep the company afloat.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you point to a specific time period or a specific, maybe a specific client where you finally got this feeling after you closed the deal, like, oh, this is it. I'm on my way now.
I think it's has a, I mean, there's the dollar amount, sure, but it also has to do with the type of client I'm taking on. Like, for example, one of my clients, we've been working together for a couple of years now. I'm trying to remember when we started working together. I don't exactly remember, but it has to do with developing a lunar company from scratch, like incubating a lunar startup. And I have always been a lunatic. My background is in planetary science. I did my doctoral research on lunar regolith. Like this has always been my passion since I was a child, staring up at the moon and wanting to go there. And so for me to have this client where I get to help them start a lunar company, and they are a venture fund, like the studio is the term, I guess, where they actually have the seed money and then they go and they raise the rest of it. And I'm still working with this company, so we're in the process actually right now of starting the company. It's just exciting to me because before I felt like I had to take almost any client that fit within my wheelhouse, because I felt like I didn't have a choice in the matter. If I wanted the revenue, if I wanted the income, I needed to take any client.
Right.
But then the clients that I really truly wanted with the projects I really truly were passionate about started to come to me a bit more. Like that's when it really clicked. Like, oh, I'm actually am building the career I always dreamed I wanted. Now I still want to go to the moon personally. So
Right. Yeah.
I haven't completed that building the career I want yet, but I'm just getting closer.
Cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. The so let's talk about some of your consulting clients. I'm going to pull up your site here for a second. I've been having my computer is not cooperating on sharing screen. So is that coming up the way it's supposed to?
I see it.
Okay, great. All right. I think I had too many tabs open earlier and it was all processing badly. So I closed a lot of those tabs for the news. So all right. So what does this mean to you? Space insights grounded in data, and then growing people's businesses. What does that mean as a consultant?
It's funny because I've been staring at this page a lot because I've already decided to change it with the marketing person I just hired. So
Okay.
I'm like, this language needs to change. Um, but what it means is that I have been working with companies, businesses, nonprofits, government entities, anybody who sees themselves growing in the space sector, whether or not they are already in space. So a lot of my clients are coming from outside the space sector, or they've only dipped their toe in and they want to expand. They know that space is a growth area. Tommy, we're just talking about that in the first segment. Space is a huge growth area, right? And so these companies are seeing that they can use their existing products and services and just adapt them or modify them or choose space customers or in some way get more involved in space. And so that's what I help them to do. It's a lot of startup companies, but also some established companies, government entities. The Space Foundation, for example, is a nonprofit that I've been a client of for years. So it's really a large percentage of people coming from outside who have great ideas, who want to change the world, change how we think about space business by implementing some great new idea or modifying what's already being done outside space to do it in space or use space data.
Very cool. Like that. Can we talk? I'm going to kind of skip the reports, although I do remember that you did a lot of reports. I'm going to skip them for a moment and kind of jump down into the case studies because I know some of these, but I actually don't know very many of these. So what do you want to talk about here?
What
There's
piques
several.
your interest?
Well, the moon one for sure. Where's the moon one? The moon one. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that one. What's this
Okay,
about?
so that's a different company than I was just talking about. So this is a client who had a great idea for a lunar mining company that he comes from a terrestrial mining background. And so he is founding, and he's in Canada. So he doesn't have the wealth of NASA, or at least what NASA had. We don't know what the budget's going to be in the future. But for, Canada is more limited in the public spending that they do in space. But he knows that there is money in mining here on Earth because that's his industry. That's where he comes from. And so he wanted to know, who are the players at the time that he hired me? Who are the players who are involved in any kind of space mining, and then particularly lunar mining? What's the status of the industry? What are the barriers? And also, who are the partners that he can partner with within Canada? And that's a lot harder, right? You can think of so many partners in the United States, but when you're specifically looking at Canada, it makes it a little bit harder.
It shrinks the universe a lot.
Exactly. But he wanted to partner because he was very proud of being Canadian, as he should be. And so he wanted to partner with his fellow Canadians to really make this a Canadian company and be proud of that. So it's a small startup. You know that lunar mining is asteroid mining, space mining in general. And I've had a client who's an asteroid mining company as well. And so it's very, very, very difficult. And so he's, as far as I know, still in the beginning stages of this startup and figuring out where his company fits in the greater scheme of lunar mining.
Huh. Fascinating. Obviously that's a topic that's interesting to me. All right. Are there any things you and I kind of started our first conversations about SPACs? So what are your Tom and I have had a lot of conversations about these.
Oh yeah.
And moments ago we just talked about Astra getting delisted because they couldn't keep it going. So what do you have any new insights on SPACs?
It's a mixed bag, right? So some of them did poorly, some of them are no longer in existence, and some of them are actually doing fairly well. I mean, I've been impressed by Rocket Lab for years. I think there are some that I don't follow as closely, and those ones I don't follow as closely because they're more telecommunications. Those are doing pretty well because that's a more established, more mature side of the space industry that I find just not as interesting. So I don't tend to focus on it as much. But the challenge with SPACs is that it was such a shortcut way to go public. And so I usually, and I'm not an expert in this, but usually the companies that go the more traditional IPO route do better because they have to go through that due diligence that a SPAC sort of shortcutted. Of course, there still was due diligence, but it seemed to be less so. And so I actually had a client in 2021 when money was being thrown at space. Like, do you remember how much investor money was going into space at that time? 2021 was a boom for space startups. And I had a client who was an investor who was looking at whether or not they should actually participate in a SPAC. And I did the due diligence for them, and they declined, whether it was me or whether it was something else that they decided was not a good reason. Like they're always good and bad, right? So I showed them the good, I showed them the bad, I showed them what was realistic, I showed them where the red flags were, and they decided not to invest in that company. And it's a personal decision or it's a financial decision, but some investors have made great amounts of money, and some have not since 2021.
yeah, it's all, Tom and I both have a bit of a finance background, and I came out early against SPACs, and then in 2021 I'm like, well, maybe I was wrong, right? Maybe SPACs are a good thing. and then later on, 2022,
No.
2023, I'm like, no, I was right the first time. I was right the first time. So where'd you go here? There we are. I'm gonna take this off screen because we're suddenly like blocking you. Let's do that. There we go. We couldn't see you for a minute. Tom, you got anything?
Well, let's. Well, I guess we can move forward. I mean, we can bounce around back and forth all we want. We got 20 minutes. You are the author of 2 books, and I'd like to hear more about them.
Sure. So my first book, Rise of the Space Age Millennials, was written during a time when we talk about Generation Z, Zoomers right now, that's how millennials used to be talked about. Like,
Yep.
it's sort of like, who are these people? And like, why should we trust them as workers and employees? And I really kind of wanted to take a good look at that, being an elder millennial, because from my point of view, there was not an alignment between what I saw with me and my peers and how we existed in the space sector in the working world versus what was being talked about, what the jokes were. And so I
Mhm.
interviewed over 100 millennials. I wanted to know why they were working in space, what inspired them, what goals they wanted, how they worked. Because at that time, like this is before COVID, right? So there was just not an alignment with how comfortable people were with technology from different generations. There was a bit more of a discomfort level of agreeing how to work together in certain ways. So I just wanted to probe that in a space minded way.
Okay.
And then Becoming Off Worldly. I don't know if you can see it from here, but that is the book where I interviewed flown astronauts and future commercial astronauts to get an idea of how to prepare for commercial spaceflight or spaceflight in general, but especially commercial spaceflight. Several people that I know have known for years before their spaceflights then became astronauts after I interviewed them, after I've known them. And so I interviewed, for example, Alan Stern, Kelly Girardi. They flew together on Virgin Galactic. I, I love Wally Funk. I interviewed her when she was a ticket holder for Virgin Galactic, and she's one of the Mercury 13, one of the women who went through those tests, those medical tests, the same tests that the Mercury men, the astronauts, went through, and the women did fantastic, but they were still not allowed to become real astronauts. It was not a NASA program. It was kind of together with NASA, but not really. And so she was not allowed to become an astronaut, even though she did so well on those tests. And then finally, Blue Origin flew her. So I interviewed her before and after her Blue Origin flight, where beforehand she was kind of like dejected. She didn't know if she'd ever get to fly. And then afterwards, she's like, yeah, it was exactly how I expected, actually. Like, she's just spunky. Like, so I wanted to gauge from the people who flew already, because I interviewed flown astronauts, what surprised them with all of their training, especially the NASA ones, but I did interview some commercial astronauts as well. What surprised them the most, that they, even though they trained, couldn't really prepare for. And then with the commercial astronauts, I wanted to know how they were preparing. And some of them had no idea when their space flights would be. Some of them have not flown yet. And some of them knew that their space flights would be coming up. And they were preparing. And they were like actively putting together plans on to do research, for example, because it's not all just tourism looking out the window. That's absolutely worthy.
Mhm.
Absolutely, they should look out the window. But I also have a whole chapter in there about microgravity research, because my background is in planetary science and astrophysics. So I think it's so super important for people to realize it's not just joyrides. It can be. It can certainly be a joyride, but also there's real work that can be done by space scientists in space, in the field, in
Mhm.
situ. And so, as a lunar scientist, for example, I still want to get myself to the moon,
Yep.
but like I'll take anything, right? And
I'm
so,
thinking,
like I just found it so important to like probe that, because I think it's a topic that is not at all talked about when it comes to these commercial space flights.
Okay. Um, Something about that. Since we're talking about that, I mean, there's a lot of chatter has been going back and forth all week about the latest tourist flight that just happened. Um, and there's a lot of lovers of it and a lot of haters of it. And it's like, I try to stay out of that fray. But I try to take the 50,000 foot level and look at the broader scope of things. And the idea is space advocacy in general. I mean, I think among us, the goal is really settlement, long-term permanent settlement. And we get into these little things because in 65 years, there's only been about 650 people that have gone up into space, and that's at all. And that's 10 a year, and so it doesn't meet our settlement goal very well. I keep pushing it. There needs to be 60,000 people living up there permanently right now, on the moon, on Mars, in orbit, the asteroid, wherever. And now we're talking about something. And so in a larger scheme, when you're looking at grand goals and grand ideas, where does tourism fit in?
So there's tourism, and then there's also transportation. And the
Yeah.
two might be combined eventually. But remember, these vehicles, they're joyrides, yes, but they're also a means to get from one point to another. And right now with the suborbital hops, they're not. It's just really maturing the technology and giving that pleasure ride and hopefully doing research at the same time. But eventually we need to talk about it in terms of transportation, and that's where the scale comes in, because we've been doing these little, like, 6-seaters, 4-seaters. You can't fit that many people in the existing spacecraft, whether it's a Dragon, Starliner, whether it's New Shepard, or Virgin Galactic's planes. You just can't fit that many, and so you can't scale that business, and so it's not profitable in the long term. I believe that Blue Origin has a path to use what they've been doing, and they're charging enough money for it to then have it be successful, have New Shepard be successful, to make New Glenn a orbital path where they can then expand from there. And I don't know if New Armstrong is still a thing, but I can see them expanding. SpaceX has this path of expanding, right? They have this little Dragon capsule, and now they're looking at Starship, which is absolutely huge, right? And so Virgin Galactic is the one I have concerns about, because I don't
Mm-hmm.
know that they can scale that company. I don't know if it's a long-term company. We need to, if you want 65,000 people per year, right? If you want something that resembles settlement, you need to have that scale. You need to not have these little taxi rides, Uber rides. You need to have jumbo jets. You need to have that level of transportation, that level of people having access to space.
Mm-hmm.
And so that whole Blue Origin flight that you just mentioned, the all-women flight, like, it was controversial because of sexism, but it was also controversial because people don't like to associate space flyers with non-professionals, even though it's been
Right.
going on for so
Sure.
long now. It's like a generation. We've
Right.
had
Since
space
Dennis Tito
professionals
flew. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
non-space professionals flying.
Right.
But the overtness, I think, of the fact that it was non-professionals who were attractive women, I think that's where the controversy came in. And there actually was professional on there who flew research. She, an aerospace engineer, and she did research on that flight, but that was overlooked. That's why I wrote the book,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I wanted a whole chapter to talk about this research that's done in space that's overlooked. But I want to also move us away from the concept that professional astronauts are going to be the only people allowed in space. I did a whole chapter at the end of my book talking about accessibility. I've got 4 disabled kids, and I don't know if they're ever going to be allowed to fly on spacecraft the way that spacecraft are designed. It's really hard to retrofit accessibility into design here on Earth and in space, especially in space. So we need to be thinking about how to make space accessible for the huge numbers of populations that are temporarily or permanently disabled. And we already have done this in terms of eyesight. Glasses are now allowed in space. They weren't allowed, for a long time, but now they
Yep.
are. Right? That's
Right.
a disability that so much of us just don't even think of as a disability, but it's because glasses are so affordable and plethorable. There's so many of them. Whereas there are other forms of disability that we just ignore huge parts of the population. So if we're talking about settlement, it needs to be open to all, or we're going to have ethical concerns about who we leave behind. And that also includes money. I don't know what to do to solve that problem about being able to afford spaceflight. I don't have a solution there for you. But if you do have that scale where you're making it jumbo jet size, I mean, most of us who are listening to this can afford a plane, right? You can buy a ticket, get on a plane. So that's accessible because of the economies of scale, whereas spaceflight is not yet there, but I can hope that it will become so soon.
Yeah, you mentioned that because it was right now. There's only one guy building anything that's potentially capable of doing that at scale. Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, ideally, his original idea, he wants to build these starships. He wants to be able to put 100 people in them.
Yeah.
Well, that's a small regional jetliner.
Yeah.
by comparison. I mean, we do this all the time. I mean, you get on a jetliner, there may be 300 people on the plane, but there's only 2 pilots. And they're professionals, and we trust them. But our goal is to get from here to there. It's the rest of us, and so that's the same thing with Starship. The people getting on that thing, their goal is to get from here to the moon, or get from here to Mars, or someplace. And you got probably 4 pilots in there.
Yeah, and I didn't finish the thought of like the transportation to go somewhere, because it is I enjoy looking out the window on a plane. That is enjoyable to me. But we're at the stage of maturity of air flight that we don't buy a ticket just to look out the window. Whereas spaceflight is going to take us some time to get to that level of maturity where spaceflight is so common that we buy a ticket not to look out the window solely. We will do that, but also to get somewhere. And therefore, we also need the destinations. We need the lunar bases and the space stations and anything, everything. We need it all.
Yeah.
I've been long of the opinion that the next stage, like I've got this whole grand architecture thing that I've been talking about for a couple of years now, and it's this progression about how do we get out into the solar system, and it starts with rocketry and moves on to satellites, and at some level we've proven a certain mastery of that technology, but the piece that I think is still missing is point to point. Like until we have got true point-to-point transit, I don't think we've fully completed the rocketry piece, and we can't get out. There's several 5, 6 commercial space stations. That's definitely the next phase. I've been saying it for years, and it's kind of nice to be right about that. And then we get to the moon, and then my elevator, and then a bunch of other stuff, right? But until we have got point-to-point suborbital, I don't think we have completely checked the box on rocketry, because that's the way that we get hundreds of people at a time getting from Seattle to Tokyo or Paris to New York. And until we get that, I don't think we've fully checked the box on rocketry. And because the box isn't checked on rocketry, we can't do the other things. I want to get you to the moon. I don't actually care if I get to the moon, but I want to get you to the moon for sure. And it's going to be a long time till we have that routine transport, and I think the only way to speed that up is point to point. So I think that should be the next thing that people focus on. I want to see more spaceports in the world, because you can't get point to point if you don't have a place to get to and go to. So
well, we did talk about
2
that.
companies that I'm working with right now that are focused on sea launch.
Yeah. Okay.
And I just have a lot of respect for that whole idea. The first attempt at it was fairly successful in terms of the technology. It was just the geopolitics and the partnerships that didn't quite work out. But like, if we're thinking about spaceports, I have worked on 3 spaceports in the past, and the 2 in the United States just did not happen because there's so many complications, let's put it that way, in terms of building new spaceports in the United States. The only one that I worked on a teeny tiny way was successful was in the Middle East.
Okay.
And so when you're thinking about spaceports for the point-to-point transportation, because there is going to be more of a market terrestrially than there is going to be destinations in space to take people to, at least initially, probably always, then you do need to think about probably expanding off land and getting that sea launch and landing facilities set up and that infrastructure and all of that. And I have some people that are really starting this from scratch, and I have so much respect for the whole idea.
I hope one of them's initials are TM.
One of them is.
he was my.
There's another one here in Florida. We've been scheming over here as well.
Okay, good. Yeah, TM was an intern of mine all the way back in 2004, I think. So kind of remarkable to see how that grows. Anyway, good. I'm glad to hear that. That's really good. So, all right, if So I guess I'm getting, like, maybe I'm misinterpreting, but I guess I'm getting mixed signals on what tourism means to you.
Yeah.
Where you, I'm not, I'm actually kind of against tourism as a concept. But I'm fully supportive of point-to-point suborbital. So I'm hoping that we take this kind of like moment in time where tourism's a thing and then shift it to transportation. I hope that that's our transition, but I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
I believe that'll be the evolution, but I'm not against tourism at all. I think it's a wonderful thing. I think it's going to be the way that we entice people to spend the money to put towards these companies to continue to mature the technology and continue to run their businesses. I also think it's a great way to spread the message. People make a fun of a lot of those women who flew on that flight, but you better believe they reach different audiences than what we usually reach here in the space community. And that's kind of the point, is making sure that a diverse number of groups out there are even aware that this exists. And I think Blue Origin has actually done a really fantastic job at this, of picking groups, different audiences, and making them aware of the fact that space is a real thing. So no, I'm not against tourism at all. And not only that, those people's lives are changed forever. William Shatner's life was changed the moment he reached the
Wow.
blackness of space and real these people's lives are changed forever, and they can spread that message to other people. And this is only a moment in time. This is only the very beginning. This is a nascent industry, and it's going to evolve. It'll evolve from the tourism that we see today to a different type of tourism that we are more used to seeing when it comes to air flight. I truly believe that, but it'll take, I don't know, decades to centuries. I'm not really sure how long.
I thought it was so remarkable that Shatner went up as an actor and he came down an astronaut. Right? He'd spent a career inspiring this whole thing, this whole industry, but he didn't really get it until he went himself. He's coming to Seattle with Neil deGrasse Tyson in a few weeks as an unscripted stage show. Neil deGrasse Tyson and Captain Kirk, like, that's going to be a hell of a show. And
that's fun to watch.
Yeah. So yeah, he came back. He came down a true believer, even though he wasn't when he went up. No, I'm not concerned about that. I'm definitely not against that. I'm concerned, and I've been saying it for a long time, when something bad happens to these A-list celebrities, I think it's going to be a shock to the system. And that's what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about the tourism. I'm worried about what happens to our industry when something bad happens.
Yeah. Because even today, the airlines have a bad day once in a while.
Yeah.
Not very often, but they have a bad day, and everybody's, a lot of people are affected by it. It's the odds of it happening in our industry in its current state today are probably much higher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll happen. And we don't know how the industry is going to react. And we don't know how investors are going to react. We don't know how potential customers are going to react. But it's going to happen. And I hope every single one of these companies is preparing for that and can weather that storm. NASA knows how to weather it. And I think everybody who flies is very familiar with the fact that they're taking risks with their own lives.
Sure.
Everybody I talk to, actually, for my book, I asked that question. And they're all approaching it in a different way, because there is mindset work and there's preparation, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually, when it comes to taking those kinds of risks and preparing yourself not only to have that overview effect, that change of perception, but also to realize that you are truly on an experimental craft, because all of these are all still very much experimental, not operational.
Virgin killed 3 people when they were still in their development phase, 2 in a refueling accident and 1 in flight. And hardly anybody ever knew that. And so it's like one of those things, like, okay, it's sad for John Q. Smith who died, but if Katy Perry or Captain Kirk had died, that would have been a different story. So I get what's happening. I'm just concerned about what happens when something bad happens. So
Well, I'm not
I
a
just heard that.
historian, but I think that we can look at the early pioneers in aviation. And, I recently was thinking about the term aeronaut because we don't use that term anymore. I
Right, right,
believe that astronaut will be
right.
like a term like aeronaut, but those early
Mhm.
pioneers in aviation and balloons and all of that, they took risks with their own lives and some of them died. And I don't know history enough to know if any of those people were really, really popular celebrities of their time, but it's something to contend with. But also, like, I truly believe that I would sacrifice my life for the chance to do something that would fulfill my dream. I'm
Yeah,
not going to go and do something crazy, right? I'm not
Right.
going I've got 6 young children. So
yeah,
believe me, I'm not going to go throw my life away, but I
Sure.
believe that it would be for the greater cause of advancing the space industry, advancing humanity to the stars by taking my, taking a space flight. And also I get into a car almost every day. And that's pretty dangerous, right? So we do have to weigh our risks.
yeah.
Yep.
Right.
And on that, we're going to have to call it a day. Laura Seward Forczyk, thank you so much for being on the show. Let's do this again. I'll be seeing you actually at ISDC in a couple months on the
I will
business
be
track.
there. Thank you so much
Yep.
for inviting me.
Oh, it's going to be a thrill to see your presentation too. I know it's going to be terrific. So thanks so much for being here. We'll have you back again and see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Okay. On Monday, the 28th, we're dedicating the entire hour to finding ways to rid the skies of space debris. Michael didn't know this yet. I'm telling him now.
I didn't.
and making a buck doing it. That's the topic for Monday night show. Our guest will be Troy Morris from Kill Morris Inc., who has ambitious plans to do just that. And he's actually a former New Space BPC contestant from 2022 in Paris. Oh
I
yeah,
didn't know.
great
All right.
great group of guys, and they're doing amazing things. I'm going to still look forward to seeing that. Anyway, at this point, good night, everyone. From the news desk at the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, this is Thomas Andrew Olson. Keep watching the skies.